Hey guys, today we're going to be reviewing our methods along with learning how to choose the best method. Okay, what your quiz is going to have on is it's going to have somewhere it's going to say, hey, solve by this method. So we're basically telling you what's the best method to solve. There's also going to be some problems where it just says solve using whatever method. Okay, so again, you're going to sometimes have some options. So if you prefer a certain method over a different method, go ahead and use that one. Okay, but we want to talk about what would make us most efficient. And so that's what we're going to do today just by looking at a couple problems and reviewing each of the methods with those. Okay, so I have the first two examples up here. So the first example gives us 2x squared minus 32 equals 0. Now, right now, we're not going to use the graphing method. I'm going to throw that one out for right now. The only time you're going to graph is when you're told to graph. So we're left with four other methods. You have your square root method, your factoring, completing the square, and quadratic formula. Okay, if you look at this problem, you'll notice that you're missing that middle term. Okay, there's no x term. Okay, like here there's the k term. There's not that term here. It's missing. Anytime that's missing, that tells you that the square root method is the best method. Okay, it's going to be the easiest because there's no b term. Okay, that middle term, which we refer to as the bx, okay, is missing. And if that's missing, then our square root method is the best method to use. Okay, it's the quickest, it's the most efficient. Okay, you also could factor. Okay, you also could use quadratic formula. Those would both work. You could not complete the square. Okay, that one would not work here. Okay, so you really have a couple options, but this is the best option. So remember, to do the square root method, I want to get the x squared by itself. So I would add the 32 to the other side. I would divide both sides by 2. And then the opposite of squaring is to take the square root. Remember, whenever you take the square root with the x squared here, not only do I have positive 4, but I also has negative 4 as an answer as well. Because whether I square either one of those, it's going to give me a positive 16. Okay, so if there's no b term, square root method is the most efficient. You could factor, you could use quadratic formula. Okay, you would get the same answer. Okay, then we step over here to b. If you look at b, okay, you'll notice that we do have that middle term, so we do not want to use the square root method. You could try and factor it, however, 3 and 11 don't have any factors that are going to give me 17. Okay, so throw that one out. Completing the square is not a good idea because I have a 3 here. We only want to complete a square when that number is a 1. So really the only one we're left here is quadratic formula. Okay, that is the only one that would work for this one. Okay, the other 3 would not work. So this one you only have one choice. Okay, so if we do the quadratic formula, it's already set equal to 0, so we're good. So I would do negative b. Remember, we got our a, b, and c. So I'd end up with 17 plus or minus the square root of negative 17 squared minus 4 times a times c. All over 2 times a. Okay, so again, put it in the calculator just like that. I would probably put the plus 1 in first and then the minus 1 in second. That's just the way I kind of do it. Okay, and you should end up with 4.92 and 0.75, okay, as your two answers when you use the formula. Okay, so again, square root for that one, quadratic formula for that one. Alright, so next one we've got here is x squared minus 3x equals 10. Okay, so I'm going to set it equal to 0 first. Now, I wouldn't want to use square root method. That wouldn't do us any good here. okay, because we have that middle term. Okay, I could look to factor. I asked myself, are there any factors in -10 that give me -3? And there are. It would be -5 and +2. So I can factor this one. You also could complete the square because there's a 1 in front of your x squared, so that would work. And then you could use quadratic formula, okay, as well on this one. So you really have 3 options here. Okay, for me personally, factoring is the quickest for me. Okay, if you think quadratic formula or completing the square would be quicker for you, then go ahead and use those. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, but for me, okay, -5 plus 2, and then I can set each of these equal to 0. So I end up getting x equals 5 and x equals -2. Okay, to me that was a lot faster than the other methods, so I would have chose factoring. But again, completing the square, quadratic formula would both work as well. Okay, for the next one, you have x squared plus 4x equals 15. Okay, so again, you kind of have some options here. Okay, if you want to go ahead and set it equal to 0 first, you can. You have a middle term, so we do not want to use the square root method. So I can think of factoring. If I ask myself, are there any factors of -15 that give me 4? There are not, so I cannot factor. So I'm left with 2 options. You can complete the square because there's a 1 here, that would be okay. And you can use the quadratic formula. Okay, so kind of your choice on which one you would want there. I'm going to go ahead and do completing the square. Okay, just because I want to review that one with you guys, and we already reviewed quadratic formula. Okay, so for completing the square, we actually would have wanted to leave the 15 on the other side. Okay, if you remember, we want our blank when we're dealing with this one. So 4x, okay, half of that would give me 2. 2 squared would give me 4. Remember, you factor this side into the same thing twice. Take the square root. Don't forget your plus or minus sign. And then subtract your 2. At this point, we'll plug it in the calculator. Okay, so if you prefer that method, you could have. If you preferred the quadratic formula, you could have as well. Okay, what you'll end up with is 2.36, and you'll end up with -6.36. Okay, and again, you should get those answers no matter which method you choose. Okay, so for today's worksheet today, you know, you can use any of the methods and that's fine. Can kind of use what we talked about here to help you pick the best method. Okay, but again, it's not wrong. You know, if I do it by factoring and you chose to do it by quadratic formula, it's okay, it's not wrong. Okay, as long as you end up with the same answers in the end, because that's what we're really after. All right, have a great day.